My name is Valerie Chisholm, and I am working along with the Black Power Chronicles to present to you today Evangeline Montgomery, better known as EJ. EJ has been an artist, curator, and art administrator, and we want to introduce you now to her. EJ, how are you doing today?
Fine.
Good, good. So listen, I just want to kind of get a little background about yourself. I understand you were born on the East Coast. Explain a little bit about your early childhood.
Well, I was born in New York City and was taken as an adopted child by a couple in Massachusetts, Boston area. And they adopted me from the very beginning. In 3 years after taking me into their household. My father was a minister, a Baptist minister, and his wife was a housewife and a typical minister's wife, taking part in most of the church activities and helping in the community wherever she could. He administered churches in some of the smaller communities around Rhode Island and Massachusetts. And they divorced when I was 9 years old. My mother kept me, and we lived in Ohio and then New York. And by the time that I was in high school, I was in New York City.
So I understand that you were drawn to the West Coast. What drew you to the West Coast?
Well, when I graduated from high school, my mother and I found ourselves in Boston, and I met a young man there and married him. He was an MIT graduate engineer. And we decided to move to California, he and I. By that time period, I was 22.
And so did you go to school there in California?
Yes. I had not attended college. I was working as an artist. And in fact, I was painting dolls' faces and religious statuary. And I decided to go to college after a while.
And what college did you go to?
California, Los Angeles, in California, Los Angeles. Was a junior college. Los Angeles City College. But it offered a lot of great activities and very important art teachers. And music department was very important there.
And so what area of the arts did you gravitate to?
Well, at first I studied textile arts, designing fabrics and weaving and printed fabrics and whatnot. And I took a lot of independent study courses. My instructors recognized that I had talent and encouraged me to take courses that I wanted and excelled in. During my time at City College, I had several important students that were successful in their art studies too. And one was Gerhard Nodell, who became director of the an art school in the Detroit area.
Okay.
And Japanese artist Mary Shigetomi, who went back to Japan.
And so they had a heavy influence on you as
Right.
far as the direction you were going in,
Right.
in your creativity. Yes, okay.
And myself, another art student was Mel Edwards, was a sculptor who ended up doing a lot of important sculptural pieces, particularly in the New York area.
Okay. So, because basically this interview is really about the Black arts movement and the civil rights movement, what were you doing in 1967, 68? Were you traveling a little bit? Did you go to the various areas where a lot of this activity was going on? Or what?
One of the things that is of interest is that my very first date with my husband, he said he wanted to design a city in a jungle. And his idea of the jungle was someplace in Africa. And I, too, was always interested in Africa. In fact, we had Africans visiting our home, and a lot of important writers and literary people and whatnot over the years.
So you've always been global in
Yes.
your, in your interactions.
During the years that my mother and father were together. And anyway,
We'll be back in a moment. All right.
I just want to adjust her mic.
Okay. Yes, yeah, you talk low, right.
I do move around a
Yeah,
lot.
I just want to attach it to your necklace so it doesn't rub
So you,
onto
a little
you.
I
higher.
have Parkinson's.
Okay, we're going to do it again. So, EJ, you had mentioned that in the 60s, during the height of the civil unrest of the Black Power movement, you were traveling and you were able to visit certain artists in various major cities. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. In 1968, I organized an exhibition called New Perspectives in Black Art, which was in the Bay Area.
Okay.
We were living in the Bay Area then. And I organized the Black artists in the area, both professional and student artists. I was a student myself at the time. And I was involved in the art school there, which was in the art school. It has changed its name.
Oh,
now.
right. So you mentioned something about in earlier conversations with you that you went to visit D.C. and you were talking with some of the professors there.
Yes. I talked with many artists in the area, and I felt that it was time for us to organize ourselves in Los Angeles. I had been a part of a group that was just getting organized as I was leaving. it was called Art West Associate, and Ruth Waddy organized that group of artists to have exhibitions in museums. At the time, the black artists were not having their own exhibitions or were not included in many of the major art exhibitions, or if we were included, it was only one or two. And in fact, the art history books didn't have any. And then finally they had Jacob Lawrence, a New York artist.
They were included in the books.
And then one or two others.
Now I also understood that you visited Chicago. You took photographs of
Yes.
different areas. What did you take photographs of?
Well,
when you were
I
in
took
Chicago?
photographs of the murals.
The murals. And so a lot of murals were going on at that time, right?
Yes, and
Okay.
they really began in Chicago. They got there as far as outdoor murals and murals of importance. One or two in New York.
And that, is that what they refer to as the Wall of Respect?
Yes, the Wall of Respect was started in Chicago in 1967.
67, okay.
And I went to see the Wall of Respect. I wanted to, I had the opportunity to just travel around different places. And I was very friendly with other people in other areas of the arts. One of my friends was Sarah Webster Fabio, who was a writer, and like that. Anyway, in '68, I organized this major show of black artists in the San Francisco area, and it was shown in Oakland.
Oh, nice, nice.
And,
you also went to D.C. at times, right, to visit?
Yes.
And so you had artist friends that
I
were
had
in
artist friends all around the
all
country.
around. Okay.
And I had joined an organization called the National Conference of Artists,
Okay. All right.
which began in 1959. It was composed of mainly membership from the historic black colleges. And Margaret Burrs out of Chicago was the founder of that organization, along with a couple of other people. And Ruth Waddy took me to their conference in the spring of 1968. And I decided that I had to organize the artists in the Bay Area. And we didn't use that name. We used the name Art West Associated North to affiliate ourselves with the Southern California group. And California being so large, you had several major cities where there was the attempt to organize chapters. But the artists in Northern California were interested in what was going on around the country. And because I was traveling around the country, I was busy organizing conferences and meetings and informing them of things that I was finding out about. And
Now, I understand you also did a little bit of documentation of some of the
Yes.
riot areas too, didn't you?
yes,
Okay.
I happen to have come from the National Conference of Artists annual meeting in '68, which was held in West Virginia. And I came from there to Washington to visit Lois Mailou Jones,
Okay.
who was a famous artist in this area
Yes.
and had received awards and been rejected from museum shows and whatnot, which she talked about all of those kinds of things. And that made me want to push even harder to organize artists. And in organizing them, I wanted them to have exhibitions in major museums. And the first show that I organized was in the Oakland Museum.
Right.
Which,
well, you know, I'm going to bring out that article that was done on you in regarding you getting that fellowship grant, which I guess was probably very instrumental in what you were wanting to pull together. Can you talk a little bit about that?
well, I was hired by the Oakland Museum under contract as a black art consultant. So I think I was the only person in the country called a black art consultant, meaning a visual arts consultant with the museum. And they hired me from 68 through 74.
Okay.
And I did at least one show, or 2 shows a year. I curated them, selected the artists, got the funding, and went through the whole activity of a major exhibition.
And this
museum.
was rare at the time, right? For
Yes,
someone to
it
go
was.
out and raise funds for
Yeah.
exhibits to
Right.
showcase talented artists,
Right,
talented black artists.
black artists.
Yes, yes.
And they were both major artists as well as student artists. So that were involved in the shows that I organized. And the newspaper, we got plenty of news publicity, and you know, the journalists in all media wrote about us and recorded the activities. In '68, we decided to do it during the school year, which was held in October. And school children were bused in to that exhibition. And that was
They were
daily.
busted from what, all over the West Coast
Northern,
area?
no, just around Northern
Okay,
California.
all right.
You know, from as far away as Sacramento
Okay.
into Oakland, where the museum was. My interest was, I had traveled, I had been to Africa and places like that. And in Africa, they were preparing, it was 1962 that I first went to Africa. And they were preparing for the first World Festival of Black Arts and Culture in Senegal. And I wanted to attend that, but wasn't able to.
Oh, okay.
But I was there and around when they were planning. When I came back to the States, I found a group of people in the Bay Area who were planning to go to that festival. And I remember giving my friend Sarah Fabio $100 to buy me any of the books and things that they may have.
Right, because you do love books.
Yeah.
Yes, she does, yes.
And so she did bring me back a few programs and whatnot. But at any rate, that was kind of the beginning of my active travels and whatnot. So, and I went to Africa several times, stayed for a while, and whatnot. And I met many of the important artists from Nigeria, Senegal, Liberia, and not just visual artists, but musicians and
All right.
and singers and whatnot.
Now, I understand your exhibit for Sergeant Johnson?
Yes,
Was a pretty big success, wasn't it?
yes, that was a very
It
important
even had
exhibit.
a catalog with it.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Sergeant Johnson his most famous piece was called Forever Free. And it was of a black woman and 2 children standing at her side. But he was really one of the major artists, really, of the Harlem Renaissance group. And he was a West Coast artist, lived in the Bay Area most of his adult life. And people like Joe Overstreet in New York, a present-day artist, studied with Sergeant Johnson and other people. But he made some of the major public pieces of the day. And his work was in the annual festivals and things that were going on in the Bay Area. And he also was one of the most important artists in the WPA period, which I had the opportunity to look through all of his papers and get to know him before he passed away. And I curated his first retrospective.
So that was a big event.
Yes.
Yes.
Now,
And how long of an exhibit was it? Was it for what? Several months?
A couple of months.
Couple of months. Okay.
But everybody from the Bay Area came out to see, not just blacks, but the whites and whatnot.
Right.
And he spent much of his life in the North Beach in San Francisco, the North Beach area, and the bars and whatnot. He hung out with the artists there, and his life was very interesting.
Now, I understand that what was it, the Oakland Museum, you had quite a few exhibits, and I'm going to ask you a little bit about that craft show that you. But you said you had a lot of celebrities that would come through your exhibits, like your at the time. What was it? Ron Dellums was the representative there, and he was very supportive of what you were doing at the time,
Well,
right? Yes.
I not only curated exhibits at the Oakland Museum, but I curated, once I started curating there, from the publicity that I got and whatnot, I was being asked by the Black Studies departments and the colleges and whatnot if I would curate exhibitions for them or projects, lectures and whatnot. And so the Art West Associated North was shown in all the schools around, and community events. Like with the Sergeant Johnson show, I photographed the entire show, and then a group home for girls printed those pictures, and we mounted them and took them around to the local libraries and things like that.
Nice.
So I not only curated for the museums, but I created projects and information for the community.
For the community.
In fact, one of the things that I said in the original catalog of New Perspectives in Black Arts in 1968 was that black people want to know who their artists are.
Right.
They want to know about them. And the artists wanted to record the events themselves. And prior to that period of time, you had the Harmon Foundation, which was a white group, basically. But the Harmon Foundation
Very supportive of fine arts. Yes.
Black artists.
Yes.
And showed them, opened doors for them. And they had traveling exhibitions going around the country. And with Sergeant Johnson, I tried to get the Studio Museum and a couple of other black museums. The Studio Museum was in New York. To sponsor an exhibition. And they couldn't raise $1,000 to
Right.
ship the exhibit
There.
across country at the time.
But that was a really, that skill was not necessarily utilized so much, right? It was, it kind of developed over the years. And
Right.
you were very fortunate that you were on top of it so early.
Yes.
To make things
Yeah,
happen.
Yeah.
Now, you know, like the exhibits that you had in the California area, you mentioned Josephine Baker came to see
Yeah.
an exhibit. I mean, name a couple of other people that came through.
Well, there was a place called the Rainbow Sign in Berkeley.
Okay.
And the Rainbow Sign was open from 1970 to 1977.
Okay.
And I was responsible for all of the exhibitions there. I did 28 major exhibitions of individual artists and 3 group shows and several conferences and whatnot. Rainbow Sign was a private membership club open to the public.
Okay.
And people like Josephine Baker, Maya Angelou, Abbey Lincoln, Oscar Brown,
Oh, okay.
and you name it, people like that
They were coming by.
performed there and came there, hung out there. And they saw the exhibitions in Rondell. He didn't miss the show.
Oh,
He
that's-
came whenever he was in town. And he was the Congress representative
Right, right.
in that area.
At the time, yes, yes. So you also mentioned something about the craft show that you did, which it toured 11 venues.
I organized it.
Talk about that.
Well, Mills College, which was primarily a women's college, was in Oakland. And they had asked that they have a festival week and some activities, and they wanted an art exhibit as part of it. And so I was asked to come in and organize an art show. And I was mainly in the craft area myself, and I thought, well, why can't I be shown too, you know? But anyway, I knew most of the craftspeople in California that were black, and I got them together and selected a show, 19 California black craftspeople. And
Pretty impressive.
they ended up having the show at Mills College, and it was sponsored by the Western Association of Museum People. And they decided that that show should travel, and it was offered to the colleges in the western states and museums, and it ended up going to 11 venues, which
Now,
was unusual to
You
get
also were
that in.
talking about that you even went to Hawaii.
Yes, it went to Hawaii and Alaska.
Uh-huh.
This was probably the first black shows
That
that
were
they
in-
had in each one of those states.
And it
but-
sounds like you had a good time in Hawaii,
Oh,
right?
yes.
They
yeah.
they really showed you a nice time.
And it was the exhibit was shown there, and it had plenty of press and sales along the way. So some of the museums bought for their collections. Mills College bought a piece for their collection of John Autobridge, who in later years had quite a history in his promotion of his art, whatnot.
All right, so I was wanting
Let
to
me show you
about this here.
a couple of these books that I brought along.
Okay.
This book, Witness, is an exhibition that was held in the last few years in Brooklyn, at the Brooklyn
At the
Museum.
Brooklyn Museum.
And it's art of the civil rights and of the 60s.
So you mean
It has a wonderful timeline of all the events
all the major
that
events?
took place
What-
around the country. And
That's amazing.
yes, and my art show of the Oakland Museum days in 1968 is listed in the timeline.
This one.
It's also has a section on the young men who went to the Biennale. Not the Biennale, I'm sorry. The athletic
competition.
competition.
Okay, all right.
The international competition.
International competitions, okay.
And they held their fists up in
Oh,
protest.
right. Yes, I remember that.
And
Yes, I remember that. You're
yeah.
talking about this one here?
yes.
Yes.
And I've marked it in this book of mine because the NAACP in San Jose decided to give them awards that year for their action.
For their action.
And they came to me to ask for an artist to design awards for them. And I found someone, George Smith, who now lives in Houston, Texas.
Okay.
But he was in our group in California.
And he did the award.
He designed the award.
Now I understand, even on page 150, there's mention of something you were involved with, right?
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
That was the 1968 show.
That was the 1968 show?
Yeah.
And so that was that the October 5 to 26? Okay. And so you are a witness?
Yes.
Yes, all right. So, and what's nice about it is that it's nice for people to know about this book,
Yes.
Witness. It really
Yes.
is.
It's
Yeah.
a wonderful
For the
reference.
documentation.
Yes. There are a number of books things that I've been involved with are mentioned. Now, Dig This, that's a show that was just shown in the last 2 or 3 years in Los Angeles. And it's lists the California artists who were involved in all kinds of shows and things. And the shows that Ruth Waddy was responsible for developing, and Samela Lewis. Samela Lewis was an art historian, the first black artist to get
And she's a friend of
her
yours,
doctorate
too. Yeah.
in African American art history. Yes, she is. And it's a lot of her work is recorded in this book. And the Brockman Art Gallery, which was in Los Angeles at the time, and the artist who is getting the most play in the United States, I believe, right now, as an American artist, is David Hammond. And David Hammond was in this group of artists in the Brockman Gallery for years, and then he moved to New York. And of course, he's very famous now in New York. But there were just any number of people, Samela Lewis. And she's also published the Black Arts Quarterly, and it's now called the International Review for African American Art. And
how can you get that? You can get that online, or how do
you can get it online.
Okay, what
but
is
it's
the name
published
of that again?
by
International. What is that again?
It's called the International Review of African American Art.
Okay, all right.
And it's published by Hampton University.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Which was one of the schools that Samela attended.
They have a great collection, don't they?
Oh yes,
Yeah.
they have a very important African American collection, and they have murals in the school that were done by Charles White and John Biggers and whatnot. Their murals are very interesting, and Elizabeth Catlett Also worked at Hampton.
Right, and you did a show with
Yes, I
Elizabeth
had a show of Catlett's work at the Rainbow Sign.
and the Rainbow Sign.
And a show of Samela Lewis's work.
And you were saying something about how she transported it, right? It was
Yes.
what?
Oh, well,
Could you tell us that
Catlett
story?
had, the United States government had, was rejecting her and her ideas and philosophy on nationalism, and refused her admission to the United States after she left the United States and married a citizen of Mexico.
Right.
When I decided to have an exhibition of her work, she had to beg to re-enter the country. So in other words, to get her work here and get it here on time, she sent pieces by friends as they were leaving Mexico. She sent the pieces up one by one.
One by one. Oh,
Yes.
that's amazing. And then how many were in the collection? I mean, were in the exhibit?
Well, there were probably about 25.
About 25 people. Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
not all were sculptures. Some were paper, because she's known for her prints. And
And so she also came for the opening.
yes, she
and
came
gave
for the opening.
Okay, and she gave a talk and all of
Right,
that. Also, it
right.
worked out really, really well. Okay, that's good. That's
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
That's a good story.
So,
So this book here.
but this,
Oh, I'm sorry.
now dig this.
Uh-huh.
This exhibition is going on in the last 2 or 3 years,
Oh, I see.
and was organized by Kelly Jones of New York. And Kelly has a number of works that I had presented, 15, 20 years ago
Oh, wow. Nice.
in that exhibition. And it's held at the Hammond Museum in Los Angeles, and was highly funded and whatnot, and has major works in that show by artists who have been in California. There's another book that I wanted to show you, which is African American art, and it's a new book, has just come out this year, and it's a visual culture and history book of major events and major artists that are black. And it includes architecture as well as the different areas of art. And these artists have all been shown in California
Prior to being published in this
yes.
book.
And it really covers quite a bit of history. So my recommendation for anybody who wants to continue their study and understanding of philosophy of black artists over the years, that you look at these particular books. Although now Dig This is talking about California, it's also mentioning what's going on and the philosophy and direction of people throughout the country.
Throughout the country.
And The Witness gives you a wonderful timeline. And this African American art gives you a good timeline also, as well as selection of images and whatnot, what's going on today as well as yesterday.
Now,
And
with you, how could I say it? You've been the artist, you've been the curator, and I'm just going to kind of bring you to this area of Washington, D.C. What brought you here?
I came here in 1980 to work in television for the Howard University new television station that they were organizing. And the person who was selected as the general manager at the time was from California.
Okay.
And he knew me, and he knew all of the kinds of programs that I had been involved in. And so he encouraged me to come and take a job here. It was short-lived. I was here for the opening of the station. And then I was dismissed. By the time this show went on, the station went on the air, they found more people, I guess, from this area who had worked in television and whatnot, and hired more of them. But at any rate,
You were here.
I was here,
Right.
and I stayed.
Right.
And I got a job with the State Department, which was more in line with what I had been doing, in that I worked for the Arts America program, which sponsored exhibitions and artists and museum people around the world.
Around the world.
Yes.
Around the world. And so what, you had a certain area that you focused on. You covered
Well,
the different regions. Tell us the
at
regions.
first, I was given Europe, all of Europe, and East Asia,
East Asia.
which meant that I had the biennales in Europe, and I had the exhibitions, and over a 25-year period,
25 years. So
I
from
worked for them.
1983 till what, 2008, something like
Yes.
that? Okay.
and
And how many exhibits were you involved in?
I was involved in more than 50 exhibitions,
Okay.
major exhibitions, and the American museums organized them, not from their collection, sometimes from their collection, but mainly they were started from scratch. They submitted proposals, and we selected them and funded the exhibitions,
You funded that.
which, you know, as much as $1 million was spent on one exhibition
Right.
at a time.
Now I noticed
And the exhibitions were not, there were very few of them that were black.
right.
And when I asked for an exhibition from the American Craft Museum in New York, they organized a fabulous show. There was 250 artists in the show and works, and 3 were black.
And 3 were black. Okay. Okay.
So and this was in the mid-1980s.
Okay, the mid 80s.
Yes,
Okay.
that it was that it began. It went to 15 venues in Europe, and the major countries.
Now you have sent a lot of black artists to different parts of
Yes.
the world
Yeah.
for exhibits, for lectures. Can you name a few that you've sent?
Yes, one of the most recent or last ones that I sent was Martha Jackson Jarvis,
Okay.
who's a sculptor
All right.
from
Yes.
Washington, D.C., and she did an excellent job.
Oh, that's wonderful.
She
And yeah.
went to Uzbekistan,
Oh, okay. Nice.
and she, you know, has since then entertained artists from that country in her home and whatnot, and has had a marvelous exchange with that group of artists.
That's wonderful.
The artists, so many of them have gone to different places. I was responsible for sending the artists and museum people all over the world.
All over the world, yes.
And before the agency closed down some of its activities, we sent artists from
Now I understand that, what was it?
different countries.
Because of the budget cuts, you created another way of getting messages out there through you call them paper shows, right?
Yes,
Okay.
we also sent paper shows.
Paper shows, okay.
And for instance, there was
And
one
what was
on
that?
Black dance
Black dance?
as a theme.
Mhm.
And there were 40, 50 panels
Okay.
that were sent out, and they were developed and copied. Paper shows were sent all over the world, the same shows. For instance, the Black Dance was offered throughout the world, and I don't know how many copies were sold to them.
Now,
Right.
you also did, what was it, on Louis Armstrong, right?
Yes, Louis Armstrong was one.
There's quite a few.
It's so many of them. I can't remember, but
Right.
it's a wonderful exchange. Since they couldn't afford the other shows or didn't have facilities
Right,
to show.
right.
When I say that we sent exhibitions around the world, they were sent to major museums,
Right,
just like our American museums.
right, right.
And
And you said and it became a little bit even more, the standards were even higher as time went on as far as
Yes,
what is it,
yes.
climate control and all of
Yes,
that? Yeah.
yes.
Because you always have to take that into
Right,
consideration, right?
right.
When you're saying
and
that.
the way they were extremely interested in how we packed our shows and how we promoted and developed them. Every show had a catalog, had a poster announcing the show and whatnot. And most of the time there were some workshops and things like that created.
What a
For
team.
instance, we
God.
had one of the last shows was called Crossing Over Changing Places. And it was a show of prints of various types of development and technology of developing prints. And that show traveled to something like 30 countries. And it was very well received, but there was an exchange of artists. For instance, artists went to the country and worked for at least 2 weeks doing workshops with artists in the area.
In the areas that they were visiting.
Right, and then that particular show the curators ended up working with the embassies here in the United States from the different countries and got an exchange for some of the local artists in the country to come here.
Now, speaking of prints, you're known for that also, right?
Yes.
Okay, and your prints are kind of special because they're one of a kind. Right? Can you explain a little bit about that process?
Well, I've been doing etchings, one of a kind, and in subject matter. And the etching is one of the oldest methods of printmaking that there is.
So, EJ, I understand that you still keep in contact with a lot of your peers as far as that are in the DC area. Did you want to talk a little bit about, some of the artists here still?
Yes. Well, one of the major artists here in DC is Sam Gilliam. And this is his retrospective exhibition, but he's being shown presently in several museums and whatnot here in the area. And
So the retrospective, is it going on now, or has it passed already?
no, this passed.
Okay, all right. Was it last year?
No, it was
A couple of years?
years
2
ago.
years, okay, all right.
At the Corcoran.
At the Corcoran.
But I was fortunate to have sent him to 4 venues overseas in different parts of the world. He went to Korea and to Germany, where he draped a whole interior of a monastery.
Oh my gosh.
And he was shown in Chile and Helsinki.
Okay.
So he had quite an interesting display of work. And his work is abstract. He has major pieces that are being shown right now downtown at the National Gallery of African American Art.
The new museum.
The new museum.
Okay.
And they're permanent pieces in the museum. He has permanent pieces in galleries around the world. This was a piece of one of his, and he has pieces at the new casino.
The MGM casino?
Yes.
Oh, all right.
The MGM casino. So
That's very impressive.
yeah,
It really is.
and he has a studio here in Washington, D.C., which he welcomes visitors.
Well, we know that you're still an active person.
Yes.
You have, but you just went to an opening in Kansas, right, in June.
Right.
Of your work, right?
Yes.
And what was the name of that exhibit? Do you?
It's
Let's see. I think.
called Majestic.
Let's see. Let's see. Hold on. I think I remember what you said here, but it's coming to
The Women's
DC,
Museum,
the Women's
National
Museum,
Women's
and that's
Museum
going to
in
be
October.
when is that coming?
October.
October. So that's just okay. I know it. It's magnetic fields.
Yes.
Expanding American abstraction, 1960s to today.
Yes.
And it was at the Kemper Museum of Contemporary Art, right?
Yes.
In Kansas.
In Kansas.
And then it will be, like you said, at the Women's Museum in October.
Yes. And I've had several pieces shown at the Krasner Museum
At
here
the Krasner Museum.
in the last year. And there were 3 different shows that were held there.
And out of all of this, I'm still so impressed that, you know, with you being, in the government, you joined the organization Blacks in Government, and they have named a scholarship in your honor.
Yes.
And you give scholarships to college students each year, right? About 5 or more students,
Yes.
right? And this is an annual event that goes on every July, right?
Right.
And I thank you for sharing that kind of energy of what you've put together over these years. And I have great respect for you. I really do. I might get emotional, but anyway. Thank you, EJ, for doing this interview. It's wonderful. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you. June
Right. Right.
of your work, right?
Yes.
And what was the name of that exhibit? Do you?
It's
Let's see. I think.
called Majestic.
Let's see. Let's see. Hold on. I think I remember what you said here, but it's coming to
The Women's
DC,
Museum,
the Women's
National
Museum,
Women's
and that's
Museum
going to
in
be
October.
when is that coming?
October.
October. So that's just okay. I know it's Magnetic Fields,
Yes.
Expanding American Abstraction, 1960s to today.
Yes.
And it was at the Kemper Museum of Contemporary Art, right?
Yes,
In Kansas.
in Kansas.
And then it will be, like you said, at the Women's Museum in October.
Yes. And I've had several pieces shown at the Krasner Museum
At
here
the Krasner Museum.
in the last year.
Mm-hmm.
And there were 3 different shows that were held there.
And out of all of this, I'm still so impressed that, you know, with you being, in the government, you joined the organization Blacks in Government, and they have named a scholarship in your honor.
Yes.
And you give scholarships to college students each year, right? About 5 or more students,
Yes.
right? And this is an annual event that goes on every July, right?
Right.
And I thank you for sharing that kind of energy of what you've put together over these years. And I have great respect for you. I really do. I might get emotional, but anyway. Thank you, EJ, for doing this interview. It's wonderful. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you.